Yeah, thank you, Jen and Mariah. Really appreciate it. You certainly pollinated my mind and hope that of others, and laid the groundwork for future questions and actions. I view this as a continuing dialogue with the economic world heavily engaged in the issue of pollinator health. I've got a couple of questions that I can start with, and we'll watch for any others coming in from the participants. And I would urge you to provide efficient responses so that we could try to answer several of these. One of the participants said, hey, you mentioned a key report that was presented to Congress, and it sounded like it had lots of great information. When's that going to be available to the public? I guess, Jen, you get to handle that one.
Yeah. I don't have a good answer for that at this time, and I'm actually not positive that it will be publicly released. If they're looking for perhaps more information, you can contact Steve Crutchfield at USDA ERS. As I noted in the presentation, we've tried to carve off little sections of that into kind of special articles and other data products so that folks can get a perspective of some of the different things that we did. But at this time, we just not able to share the valuation figures, so I apologize for that.
Well, thank you, and it's nice that a lot of people care about the work you've been doing, because it really matters, and those outcomes can be really tools in moving forward in the future. Another question is that what do you see as the key questions, and I would add outcomes, that are related to pesticide use as you look at the landscape of your work? And either one of you can respond to that, or both.
Mariah, do you want to answer first?
Yeah, I was actually thinking, I think the one part of the pesticide issue, I've of course today chosen to focus on the landscape fragmentation. And one issue we have here is as we have more land converted to agricultural use, there's going to be more pesticide use that is compatible and goes along with that agricultural production. So I think that there does need to be careful consideration of what types of pesticides are being applied, when and where and how. We could do a lot to help the bees by just being considerate along these lines. I don't think that we'll see a future without pesticides. I think it's a matter of understanding how to manage them alongside bees, making sure everybody is aware, and looking at those economic costs and benefits. We don't want to lose the bees to pesticides, and we don't want to lose the pesticides to bees.
I think that's well put. I would add, we've got a couple of thoughts on that in the economics chapter of the PrEP, and one thing we've been working on with partners at EPA is determining a method of evaluating pollinator health in the context of pesticide regulation. So speaking, as Marja said, that cost-benefit type trade-off. We've also got in our different kind of extensions a little bit of a discussion of evaluating agricultural practices on pollinator health, and I think that there's room in there to explore some pesticide type questions which are more related to modeling efforts and not just cost-benefit type trade-offs, but looking at bioeconomic models and models over time as well.
So this is Tom. If I heard you right, you said you're working with folks in EPA and sort of cross-pollinating. Is that correct?
I like that term, cross-pollination. As with nearly every single one of our projects, they are all collaborative. And early in our process of forming the team, we met with EPA several times and were informed by their work. And some of our efforts are described in greater detail in that CPD Honeybee Health Action Plan, which is a collaboration between USDA and EPA agencies. And as I noted in the presentation, we've actually done like a joint workshop. But at this time, we don't have any published output, but I've had several discussions and we have some mutual interest.
Well, as a pollinator advocate, I'm glad to hear kind of what I already knew, that EPA and USDA are working closely together. Another question, are current surveys adequate to provide the metrics we need to truly measure colony health? And if they're not, what else do you need?
Well, I'll jump in there first and say, from what I understand, so I would say no, current surveys aren't adequate to provide accurate measures of colony health. We need them a lot. We need actually to take the surveys to measure those things and then do it at regular intervals. I think from what Jen had mentioned earlier, Josh Aurora and his colleagues are working in that direction and trying to get more information about colony health. I think what we have to ask when we look at that sort of survey is what's going to be the objective of it. We probably, I would hope, want to move toward a more proactive regulations and policies regarding pollinators. And so if it's developed in a reactive manner of just monitoring pollinator health after the fact, it may not be as informative as if we can then start to use it to more reliably and accurately forecast trends and possible threats to pollinator health.
Thank you. Thank you. Another question. Oh, did you want to add anything?
Oh, I suppose I could. I mean, data is a topic near and dear to my heart. Certainly, I'm a fan of data, and we can't do our work without it, but not all data is necessarily the same thing as information. So I'm really pleased that there's been efforts by NAF to put together new surveys. There's been funding available for those. I'd really love to see more surveys related to the economics of pollinator health, such as a national pollination service fee type thing, but we'll take the kind of data we can get, and we'll just see what comes down the pipeline. We'll work with what we have, but I would certainly like to see more.
Thank you. This was touched on, I think, in Mariah's presentation about how you calculate the value of native pollinators and determine that value. We're looking at it as an incremental value. Do either of you have anything to add more on that?
Well, we've been thinking about this a little bit. I think one of the big challenges right now is knowing what are all the native pollinators. From my talks with entomologists, there's still lots of discoveries being made about how they work, what flowers and processes they work with. But I do think we could start to get at some basic existence values. If you look at the Forest Service right now, they have posters of bumblebees that are native to the eastern United States and those that are native to the western United States. And right now those posters have 30 or 40 bumblebees on them. What would happen if people started to see those bumblebees disappearing? At what point would we start to see people actively paying money to preserve bees? That's the kind of scenarios we could work with and do research on to try to understand better what's the marginal value of a bee species and what's the value to people in general in terms of non-market values.
Thank you. Thank you. Looks like we're running out of time, Karen, so I'm going to close just with a quick comment. I like the Hatfields and McCoy's effort to get people to work together. That there's a natural tension between two communities that need each other in terms of the commercial beekeepers and the farmers and ranchers who manage the agricultural landscapes where they need their forage. Economics and sociological sciences both can provide key inputs into that. You mentioned data. I keep hearing from folks who are looking at big data and precision farming, in that those managing the landscapes can identify portions of their land that aren't economically profitable to produce crops that may be economically profitable with the right incentives to produce forage for bees within those same landscapes. It'll be interesting to see how things like that move forward.